Hello, everyone. I am Anne Kampf. Welcome to this new session of the series, The Human Side of High Performance. All my LinkedIn Live series are private, independent projects that I host in my personal capacity, created as space for learning, connection, and thoughtful exchange. I invite you, as usual, to write your comments and questions directly in the LinkedIn comments section as we go. In today's session, stress, safety, connection, we'll look at what happens beneath the metrics, the emotions, the biology, the relationships, and the very human realities that shape what we think, choose, and how we perform. And today we are exploring a question many leaders quietly carry. How do we stay grounded, clear, and connected in a world that feels stressed and fast? Or more simply, how do we lead well while being fully imperfectly human? To guide us, I'm deeply honored to welcome Alison French. Alison is the managing director of Alto Solutions, where she blends neuroscience, psychology, emotional intelligence, and relational practices to help leaders navigate complexity and lead with clarity. She brings more than 20 years of experience across sectors, government, private, industry, education, and nonprofit, supporting leaders in building cultures where people can think clearly, collaborate openly, and grow sustainably with joy. Her work rests on a simple but powerful truth. When leaders understand what their brain and nervous system are doing, especially under stress, they can shift from reactivity to intention, from disconnection to connection, and from overwhelm to grounded presence. She's a graduate of Cornell University, a contributor of ATD, and a voice of thoughtful, human centered leadership for thousands of leaders on LinkedIn, too. Alison, welcome. I'm grateful to have you here.
Thank you, Anne. I'm so glad to be here today.
Um, I was talking to Alison before we went live that Vienna, Austria is saluting actually Vienna, Virginia.
Vienna connection. I love it.
Yes, me too. Before we move into stress and safety and connection, I'd like to begin with the human story behind your work. Because from my perspective, frameworks matter, but they are always shaped by lived experience.
Hmm.
And I've noticed that leaders who understand pressure most deeply are usually those who have felt it personally.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So, what first drew you into the intersection of neuroscience, emotional intelligence, and leadership?
That's a great question to start with. I work with a lot of leaders. I have been working with leaders for many years. And I kept watching these folks, just really smart, well-intentioned people, do things that they regret later on. And maybe because they're moving too fast, or maybe because they're under some sort of stress. And I put myself in this category as well. I sometimes just move way too fast, and I don't take the time, and got to practice what I preach, of course, taking that time to really think about what's going on in my body, in my brain, giving myself the pauses that I need. I've noticed that when I'm able to do that and be more reflective, I'm a better leader, I'm a better partner, I'm a better human. So it really resonated with me, and it gave me this neuroscience idea. I really got involved after reading a book by David Rock called Your Brain at Work. He's the founder of the Neuroleadership Institute, and that book was kind of life-changing for me. And I think neuroleadership, neuroscience gives language to the
Mhm.
things that I'm seeing and helps me when I talk to leaders. I talk to them. One of my workshops is called "It's Not You, It's Your Brain," and it really gives them the permission to say, okay, these are some things that might be happening inside of me that I'm not consciously aware of. So how do I catch myself? How do I take that moment and name it, name it to tame it, and then go forward with the good intention that I had, and understanding how you can sometimes, you can get hijacked by your own brain.
Yeah.
So all of this was really fascinating to me. I think that connection has also been a very important theme throughout my entire life. If you ask anybody who knows me, probably the first word that comes to mind is connector. And I've done that throughout my entire life, my entire career. And it's something that's very important to me. And I see that, as what's going on in your brain, really, to understand the connection, how it helps. So those are all a number of different things that kind of brought me into this field.
Interesting. And, I observed different persons in my friend circle, in my colleague circle, leaders searching for better strategies when they are actually, or actually what they are looking for, they are needing is better self-understanding. And here I totally agree with you that knowing not only a bit of neuroscience can help a lot, or being coached in that direction can support for a better self-understanding.
Absolutely. I think the emotional intelligence has multiple quadrants, as you probably know, and that self-awareness really drives everything. Before you can self-regulate, you need to be self-aware, and then you can be socially aware, and you can manage relationships better. But that self-awareness really has to come first. And when I work with leaders and we do assessments based on emotional intelligence, if that self-awareness is low, and even if their social awareness is really high, we always come back to that self-awareness piece and working on that to be even more socially aware and manage yourself better, manage the people that you interact with better.
Right. What, from those interactions with the different leaders and clients with whom you are getting in contact, what feels most misunderstood about how human function under pressure?
So I think we as humans, we sometimes see pressure as like a test of our mettle. How good are we at bringing on the heat, at handling the heat? Sometimes, years ago, there was an article, I believe it was in the Wall Street Journal, that talked about the idea of how we wear our stress as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And and that's wrong, right? In reality, pressure and stress, that's what puts us into fight or flight. And so when we're under pressure, sometimes people think, oh, this is the best I'm going to be under pressure. And in reality, it really doesn't show us who people are. It shows us what their nervous system is accessing. And that could be positive or negative. Typically, it's not positive, and you're going into a state of fight or flight. So I really feel like we need to change our perspective on what pressure is, what stress is. Is it good or is it bad? There's an optimal stress curve, right? We all know that you need a little bit of stress, or otherwise you're going to be bored, you're going to be complacent. But it gets up to a certain level where it's constant, and then you just go down the slope, basically, and
Right.
you're not functioning well. So there is an optimal stress level, but we have to be very mindful of what that is for ourselves and other people as well, and not wearing our stress as a badge of honor, but seeing what it's doing to us biologically, neurologically, and being able to manage that in our reactions.
Alison, we have our first comment. Thank you, Ahmed Salah. Actually, it's a question. Would you agree that operational excellence is impossible without psychological safety at leadership level?
Oh, absolutely, Ahmed. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah, because when we talk about things like being excellent in a business, high motivation, high productivity, high retention among your employees, they need to feel safe. by the culture and from the leader. So the leader is setting that tone of safety, and we are going to react, we as employees, perhaps we are going to react positively or negatively based on how safe we feel. I mean, safety is basically the absence of perceived threat, right? It's the threat, it's the idea that if you make a mistake, it's okay. If you ask a question, you're going to get an answer, and you're not going to get points marked off because you're asking an interesting question. And even if you disagree with something, that won't negatively impact you in some way. So I think it's really important to have that psychological safety in the workplace, and the leader sets that tone.
Right. And because you mentioned to have, to feel safe in order to act, to ask, to do some things. It's something that I was taught in the university by one of my teachers, a great lady. She told me, you have to see it, you have to do it, and then you have to be able to teach it. So in order to be able to do it and then to teach it, you or one has to feel that there's a safe environment. And as you said, not to be finger pointing, not to be judged, because we are humans, and errors happen, and people might be in their internship period, might be at their beginning of the career, and they should feel safe to ask questions, to do things.
Yeah, and leaders are humans too, right? We're all humans, and leaders need to feel safe as well. And like you said, they need to be able to know what it means to be safe and to make their employees feel safe. And it's possible that they have something in their background, in their history, where they didn't feel safe. And that could work either way. It could work against them in that, well, that's all they know, so that's how they're going to lead. Or if they're very emotionally intelligent, they have real good self-awareness, they can actually take that and use it and say, okay, I was in this environment where I didn't feel safe. How can I fix that for this new environment where I'm the leader? How can I make sure my people do feel safe and don't experience what I experienced?
Right. We do have another
Sure.
question from Tehman Alam Siddiqui. How do you differentiate between stress and pressure?
That's a good question. I mean, these are all good questions, but I think that for me personally, pressure to me feels more like someone is exerting it on us, whereas stress can be more organic. Stress can be something that we just feel. We do put pressure on ourselves, but stress is what we feel when we put pressure on ourselves, right? So I think that that's where there's a slight delineation. I think I was using them interchangeably before, and they are very similar. But pressure is something that often is exerted on us, either by ourselves or by someone else, and then stress is kind of what we feel.
Right. So pressure, it's the precursor of stress. It's what causes stress.
It can, yeah.
Right? It can
Mhm.
cause stress. There's another comment from Ahmed. Think what's most misunderstood is that pressure doesn't automatically create performance. Correct. It often creates protection. When people feel threatened, they don't become sharper, they become defensive. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's
Oh,
very true.
absolutely, fight or flight. Yeah, and from a neuroscience perspective, what's happening here is that, and David Rock defines these different social domains that we have that our brain treats the same way as physical threats. So what's happening in the brain is that the rational thinking part of your brain, this prefrontal cortex, that has, in the evolution of humans and of the brain, is a more recent addition to our brains. That's the seat of logic. That's the seat of thinking. That's what shuts down when we're in this huge amount of stress, when pressure is on us. That shuts down. And what happens in the brain is that the amygdala, which is part of our ancient brain, starts to release the stress hormone cortisol. which kind of goes through our body, produces glucose, which is a sugary substance. And what that serves to do is it shuts down what it considers to be unnecessary functions, of which rational thinking is one. So you are becoming potentially more defensive, or you might just remove yourself entirely from the situation. So fight or flight. And again, it's not your fault. It's happening in your brain. This happens to all of us. But yes, when pressure is on us, when we are feeling that prefrontal cortex, that thinking rational part of the brain, is put on hiatus, and we're reacting.
Right. Before behavior shifts, chemistry has shifted already.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So
Um,
another good observation by Ahmed.
what are the earliest signs that stress has begun to override conscious choice?
Ooh, I think when you feel something is really urgent, when it isn't, where everything feels like a fire drill to you. I think that's when stress is really overriding conscious choice. And you sometimes tend to speed up your speech patterns, speed up, what you're doing at the risk of making mistakes. Sometimes you feel like you're not curious enough about things, that you're just the go do mentality takes over, and you're not really thinking things through. Sometimes you shorten your sentences because you're trying to move very quickly through things. So I feel like those can be your first tells, that stress is overriding choice.
Right. Um, why do you think capable leaders, managers, well intentioned,
Mhm.
sometimes become more controlling or distant under stress? And there's another question coming from Teman. How do you deal with leadership or management that only knows how to implement pressure rather than create a positive culture, resulting in worker feeling defensive all the time?
Sure. I'll address them both. I'll address yours first. I mean, basically control and withdrawal are classic survival strategies, where this is fight or flight. They're not personality flaws in any way. They're defaults in your nervous system when safety is threatened, when safety doesn't feel certain. So I think that's what happens if there's a lack of safety, if there's an undue amount of pressure and stress in your day, in your week, in
Mhm.
your life. And this could come from multiple places too. This could come from professional, it could come from personal as well. But again, I think it's classic fight or flight. That's what's going on. That's why capable leaders, well-intentioned leaders, become either controlling or distant rather. Gosh, as far Taman, you're in a tough situation. I absolutely acknowledge that, and I honor that. Leadership and management that only know how to implement a pressure kind of a culture, right? I mean, they're driving the culture, and they're driving it to be very, immediate, probably quick response, sense of urgency, even if urgency isn't there. Um, I think again, it might be because this particular leader might be defaulting to something that they became conscious of in a previous position. And I also think that, but you want strategies of how to cope with it, how to deal with it as well. What I've found is that being able to handle the stress ourselves, being able to do whatever centers us, breathing activities, music, um, anything like that, that might help you center yourself. When you are viewed as a more centered person, other people start to see that as well, and that includes leadership. Sometimes you can it depends what kind of relationship you have with the leaders as well. If you have an open relationship with them, there might be an opportunity to express what you're feeling about, without placing blame on them,
Yeah.
but express what you're experiencing and ask them if they're experiencing it as well, because again, they might only know this experience. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, I think that I've heard also a lot of podcasts on this topic and also on emotional intelligence. Um, I don't know if this is a consequence of the pandemics, but due to this hybrid and more online meetings, we kind of forgot how to connect
Mhm.
genuinely. Um, some people might be introverts and might be afraid to address such a topic directly. Um, to to give feedback on such a topic or to express one's feelings,
That can
this
be scary.
it yeah, that can be scary. And this takes also a lot of courage.
Mhm. I think peers can help as well. And what I don't mean by that, I don't mean necessarily, get a group together and stage an uprising.
No, no.
What I really mean is you can get validation from peers and their strength in numbers that if you and all of your peers are feeling something, you might be able to approach as a group in some way, in a very gentle way. But hey, we would like to set up a conversation with you, to explore some things that we're feeling in this environment. Would you be willing to have lunch with us? Would you be willing to have, just some time with us over Zoom, if that's the case, if it's more of a virtual hybrid environment?
Mhm.
And, and to the point again of being calm yourself and trying to find ways to model that. There are things called mirror neurons in our system that make it such that when one person signals a very strong emotion, it resonates out to others on the team such that the rest of the team starts feeling that way without anybody consciously realizing it. And
Right.
this could work in our favor and it could work against us. I mean, if there is a leader who is, feeling anger and rage or feeling like everything has to be done yesterday, that's going to mirror out and we're going to start feeling that pressure, that stress, because that's the strongest emotion in the team. But if the strongest emotion in the team is more of a calmness, more of a centering sort of a thing, that can ripple out as well.
Right. This ripple effect is when it strikes. One nervous system, as you said, sets a tone that others unconsciously calibrate to.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
yeah, how can leaders recognize the precise moment they've shifted from intention into survival mode?
Well, I think that when there is that they're overriding themselves. So
Mm.
instead of their good intentions, they feel the need to be in control somehow. They need to feel the need to be right, or fast. And I think that's sort of the moment when, if you can catch that as a leader, if you can catch that moment, you can shift out of it. You can shift out of the survival mode and back into a more conscious way of being. That I feel like that's the moment where the choices starts to narrow. That when you feel like you need to, be the authority, you need to be right, you need to be in control of everything. Vulnerability can help with that. If you are, able to be more vulnerable and understand that you don't always have to be right as a leader, then you can really control that shift. You're not moving into it as readily as somebody who doesn't accept that maybe I might be wrong.
I, yeah. The thing is that if stress is inevitable,
Yeah.
and it is, yeah, most of the time, that's the moment, that's the point when safety becomes essential.
Hmm.
Not as a soft concept, but as a biological condition for performance.
Yeah,
And this is not something that is created from one day to the other. It's something that it's built in time
it is.
because it comes, I think, with trust.
Oh, absolutely agree. I mean, trust is the foundation. If you've ever, looked into the work of Patrick Lencioni, where he does the behaviors of a team, started as the dysfunctions of a team.
Mm.
And the bottom layer is trust. You have to have trust and the top layer is results, but it's pyramid. So you have to have that layer of trust to be able to get to your results ultimately. So yeah, trust is key. Absolutely.
From the neuroscience perspective, what does psychological safety actually mean in the brain?
Well, it means that we are keeping our prefrontal cortex alive. We are more able to access the centers in the brain for learning, for creativity, for reasoning. All of those things will improve if we can bypass that amygdala hijack. Your cognitive flexibility just increases, and people, that's why people feel safe.
Right. And safety, it's not necessarily defined as comfort. Yeah. It's
Mhm.
cognitive availability in this case.
Cognitive availability, absence of perceived threat. Yeah.
What changes when in the brain when people feel safe enough to think, disagree, or challenge with it? We said that the prefrontal cortex takes the lead, and
Right.
it's there, and there's cognitive availability. And uh,
Mhm.
but did you notice there's also something else that shifts?
Well, I will say that I'm not a brain scientist. I do enjoy reading brain science and applying that to leadership work. But from what I've learned, it's basically the neurons in those thinking, the right brain, the seat of creativity. Those are what's firing, and
Yeah,
that's where you're able to just to access more.
yeah. And in complex environments,
Mhm.
uncertainty is a constant. Uncertainty and change is a
Yes.
constant. So leaders aren't removing uncertainty, they are regulating
Mhm.
how it's experienced by them, and then in this ripple effect by the team that they are leading.
Yeah, our brain hates uncertainty. Our brain hates ambiguity, and most people would probably relate to that. I think that's a concept that resonates with a lot of folks. So uncertainty, what it does is it takes away. We have this need to be able to predict, being able to predict something, being able to make something a habit. That's how our nervous system stays calm. And going back to David Rock and his work, he has this model called SCARF. And again, that's each of these SCARF, each of those relates to a social domain that our brains essentially treat the same as physical threats. And the C in SCARF is certainty. And so that's a really big one. If someone doesn't feel, and especially if they have an inclination to be more certain, and different people are different ends of the spectrum for certainty, right? Some people really embrace change and uncertainty and they're okay with it, and then there's people completely on the other end who just just can't cope at all with
Yeah.
any little bit of uncertainty. So we have to kind of appreciate the entire spectrum there. But uncertainty in general can be a threat to us. And again, it's just how different people respond to it. But as leaders, we can know that about our people and how much stress or how much uncertainty is a threat driver for them.
Mm.
And we can almost map that and understand, if I'm talking to Anne, well, she has a very high need for certainty. How can I make it feel more certain? What are some behaviors that will help with certainty, in turn creating safety? So things like as simple as naming it, as simple as saying, I recognize that things are very uncertain right now, and I'm feeling it too as a leader. If a leader can say that, if a leader can put him or herself into the shoes of somebody who's feeling uncertain, They might not be able to completely do that because we all come from our own backgrounds and biases, but also trying to understand why those people are feeling uncertain. So coming to, Anne and saying, what is it that you're uncomfortable with right now? What uncertainty is bothering you the most? And then trying to address that piece of it, again, as a leader. I think sometimes slowing the pace down can really help. I mean, we know that in change management, for instance, which is where I've done a lot of my work, rapid change is not as successful as slow-paced change for a number of reasons. And one of them is because you're creating safety with slower paced change. Acknowledgement of the impact that what people go through is very real. So I think it's really important that leaders adopt some of these behaviors to reduce uncertainty and create safety, even though we know we can't take away the uncertainty, but how do we manage it, like you said?
Right. Ahmed wrote, Anya, when you mentioned the precise moment that they've shifted from intention into survival mode, that really stood out. That shift is subtle, correct, yet incredibly costly. The moment intention turns into survival, leadership often turns into control, and that's where trust quietly begins to erode. Precisely, yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
And maybe the real leadership skill is recognizing that shift before the team feels it.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's more easy said than done.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because we are all human beings, perfectly imperfect. And as you, Alison, mentioned, we are built, or we have a bag full of different emotions that we carry with, experiences that we carry with, coming from the family, from school, from
Everything.
friends, job, everything.
Right.
And because we are not machines, and not so precisely, we cannot control immediately all those emotions.
Mhm.
It's good to be aware of them, or to start being aware of them, and take a moment, acknowledge them, and communicate them also to us and also to the team, depending on the situation. But it's yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
unfortunately.
if it's hard to do, but I mean, there's ways to train your brain. There's ways to essentially practice some of these skills as a leader to be able to catch that shift as it's happening and stop it from happening, essentially. Stop your brain from shifting into survival mode. There are ways to do that. I mean, you do need to be self-aware. You need to be able to, like we talked before, what are some of the signs that you're moving into that? Maybe you're feeling that tightness. You might feel a tightness in your chest. You might feel it physically. You might start to speed up your speech. You might start to feel sort of a franticness. And if you can catch any of those things and just reset yourself, just take a few seconds, do some breathing activities. Or one thing I like to do, you mentioned some of the work I've done around joy and cultivating joy. It is proven that if you take a moment to acknowledge one thing that brings you joy, it can reset you. And one of the techniques I've learned through my collaboration with my partner in this cultivating joy work, one of the things I've learned to do is what's called a joyful gratitude walk. You can do this in 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long walk. The idea behind it is that you basically figure out how long you're going to walk and where the midpoint will be. And you can do it in your office. You can just walk to the door and come back. But as you're walking to whatever that midpoint is, you are either thinking or saying some of the negative thoughts that are coming into your mind, some of the frustrations that are coming into your mind, some of the things that you want to expel. And when you reach that point, you physically turn around and come back and express some gratitudes. Again, either verbally or in your head. I find that verbally actually works really well if no one else is around. Sometimes my dog gets to hear them. But I find that is a great little reset of your brain. And then you can better catch yourself in that moment because you've expelled some of the frustration, you've replaced it with joy, and now you're activating the joy centers in your brain, and you're reactivating your prefrontal cortex, and you're not activating that threat response. So that's, again, it takes practice though. You have to do this often. You can't just say, I'm going to do it once and it's going to work. It's going to take a little bit of time. Or, simply breathing, right? I like to do one where I inhale for 3 and hold it for just a moment, and then exhale for 4. And then I inhale for 4, hold it, exhale for 5. So you're exhaling longer than you're inhaling. And you do it about 3 times. But it's a really good brain reset. And if you can catch if you can do that, if you can just catch the very moments of you're feeling tight in your chest, you're feeling that frustration come through, just breathe or take that little walk, and you can reset it. It just takes practice.
Right. But when one is a leader and it's leading a team and there's pressure coming from a lot of direction, I know, from the market, from the whatever happens in the world, most of us, because we are human, we also have or live with the fear that we are not positively validated by our peers, by our team members. And I think that this is also one of the reasons many people are shifting also immediately in this fight or flight, because they have this fear of being rejected by their team or by their peers.
Right.
From my perspective, one thing that's good is telling your peers, your colleagues, your team, if it's not a topic that really burns, I hear you, I acknowledge that, but I need some time to process it, and I will come back to you in I don't know how many minutes, hours, days, but not leave them without an answer, without the feedback, because validation and feedback are different things.
Absolutely. And I would make one minor change to what you said. I would replace the word but with and. I hear you, I understand. Perhaps restate it back to them, make sure you understand rather than just saying that you understand. And I need some time to further process this. So I think the and is really important.
Yeah. You speak about rupture and repair. What does repair look like in real leadership moments?
So when, what you're talking about, when someone, like a trust has been broken, or I think you have to name it. I think you really have to name it. I think, again, communication is really key to building trust. And when trust has been destroyed in some way, you have to rebuild it. And the only way is through communication. So I think that if you can take responsibility for an impact, I think that's really important. It's not necessarily, it's validating. You said that before, this idea of validating somebody, to say, we maybe we both have a part in this, or maybe I, as the leader, I do have a part, acknowledging that you have a part in it, even if you're not the leader, even if it goes both ways, being able to name what's happening without defensiveness, and taking responsibility for the impact of whatever it was. And then you can reestablish some clarity. I think the repair, it's not going to take away whatever happened, but it can help build trust. And I think it's really important to actively repair. A lot of people just, oh, it's water under the bridge, and they move on. But I think acknowledgement is really important.
Yeah. And facts. not just words. Um, Repair, particularly, I find it very powerful because it signals maturity and not weakness.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um,
Admitting that you have a role in what happened, that's vulnerability, and vulnerability builds trust. It's not a weakness at all. Some people see it as a weakness, though. And so, again, it's like retraining our brain a little bit to say vulnerability increases trust. It does not weaken us as people.
yeah, and safety creates the conditions. Then connection activates the condition for making performance, for performing better.
Hmm.
Because without connection, safety remains theoretical. Without connection,
Yes.
there's no trust. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Connection is super important, as we talked about in the beginning of this call, where we just we do better with connection. We are more calm. We think better when we're connected with someone. We think better on our own as well as with other people, because we have that sense of connection, that calmness. When you feel connection, what's released is the hormone oxytocin, and
mhm.
so that is the same hormone that's released in pregnant women to bond with their babies. So if you think about, you're being flooded with this, and it's one of the feel good hormones, right? And so you're much more likely to feel trust and safety and all of the things that we've been talking about. When connection isn't there, we're more vigilant. We don't trust as much
We
as
are
we have a
expecting the
connection.
worst.
We're expecting the
Yeah.
worst. We're making assumptions, right? We're making assumptions that fill the gap where communication should be.
Right. And this is also because of this need of predictability.
That's right. Yep.
And yeah, the mind sometimes is playing with us. So,
I know.
yeah.
This is
Um,
true.
Connection, it's not a relational luxury, it's the cognitive infrastructure. It's the foundation on which we build relations, trust,
Hmm.
high performance. Um, what happens when connection is absent, besides, the lack of trust?
Hmm. Well, I
And
mean, yeah, like we said just a few moments ago, people stay, try to protect themselves. They're remaining vigilant instead of being open to possibility. Um, they're not able to think creatively. They're making these assumptions, like we talked about. I think, when connection is missing, and again, the most important one being trust, but I think it closes us off when connection is not there, and that limits our thinking.
limits our thinking, limits the cooperation within the team, and limits, creativity, innovation,
Absolutely.
and everything starts to fall apart.
Hmm.
Um, so leadership presence is or should be less about control and more about self-awareness, emotional steadiness, um, communication. We hear a lot and we read a lot also on social media and on LinkedIn, different types of leadership styles. Um, I think that in order to be a good leader, and I'm not talking, when I say leader, I'm not necessarily talking about someone that has a high function or a high position within a
Title, yeah.
company. Yeah. Um, so from my perspective, my opinion is that to be a great leader, one has to be able to adapt to different situations, different people, meaning different personalities,
Hmm.
to be able to recognize what it's um, pushing and pulling him or her away from and
Hmm.
towards
Yes.
a certain reaction, to be able to recognize maybe some patterns within the team, because we tend, generally speaking, yeah, w- uh, also at home, yeah, we tend to give more chores to the kid that it's always there supporting, or the kids are giving more chores to their moms because they are there. And I'm I know that it's a very how do I say, simple example, but these things happens also within teams.
Oh,
We tend
absolutely.
to shift sometimes a certain task to the person that we know he or she solved it also in the past, even if
Mm,
he or she does not have that responsibility and function. So
mhm.
being a good leader from my perspective is also to be able to recognize those things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's the social awareness part for sure.
Um, what does co-regulation actually look like between a leader and a team?
Well, again, I think that going back to our idea of mirror neurons,
Mm,
whatever that strongest emotion is emanating from the leader is going to impact the team. So a leader who models calm, a leader who models curiosity, a leader who models vulnerability, that's going to be reflected in the team as well. And I think the other things that a leader can do is to really be very communicative in terms of naming the reality, naming what's going on with him or herself in the team, asking questions, open-ended questions, or probing with why questions. There's a technique called perspective getting, and actually the technique is called looping.
mm,
When we usually take someone's perspective in that we try to imagine what it would be like in their shoes, but we can't completely do that because we're not in their shoes. So
correct.
we have to ask open-ended questions. We have to ask them, why are you feeling this way? And then looping it so that you absolutely understand what someone is saying. So if you say something to me, I'm going to paraphrase it, repeat it back to you, and I'm going to say, did I get that right? What am I missing?
Yeah.
And if
We
you say, "Yes, I got it right," then great. But if you say, "No, that's not quite it. Here are some pieces," and I want to repeat that process until I understand exactly where you're coming from. So I think the leader is responsible for setting that emotional tone that everybody else can kind of sync up to.
mm. We have some more comments. That's such a practical and grounded way to approach it. I really appreciate the connection between awareness and physiology, especially noticing the physical signals before the behavior follows. The idea of a joyful gratitude reset is powerful. It turns regulation from theory into practice.
Absolutely
It's
agree.
Then another comment from Techman, limits our thinking, and everything is very true. Leadership must be such that it must be trustworthy. In fact, a leader must radiate trust from their attitude and body language and words, actions. Um,
Actions always speak louder than words. Absolutely. I mean, it's
right.
trite to say, but it's true. I mean, there's been work around, how we communicate and how meaning is inferred, and it's a combination of things. It's not just your words, it's your words, it's your how you use your voice, it's your body language. All of those kinds of things come together in conveying a message. And, it's a hard job to be a leader because you have to be
Mm.
mindful of all of those.
Yeah, and I think that that only the attitude uh, it's not helpful, because you can't fake it till you make it. Or
Mhm.
if you do this, maybe you will have success several times, but not um, every time. um, I think it's a matter of attitude, style, and approach.
Mhm.
So what is your attitude towards a certain situation, certain people? In what is your style in approaching them? and how do you approach them?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of qualities. Um, and yeah, it's true that a leader should radiate trust from their attitude and body language and words. Um, but again, we are not machines. We are perfectly imperfect human beings, and sometimes they cannot radiate trust
Mhm.
because they are also living the same uncertainty that the team is living.
Right, right.
Um, and they have to balance that. So, yeah,
And they can admit that. They
yeah.
can say that, there's a lot of uncertainty and it's impacting me as well because that makes them real. That makes them vulnerable and real people as opposed to someone that might be put up on a pedestal somewhere. Then they're in it with the team and the team sees them. This culture of sharing becomes more apparent. The team sees them as somebody who gets it, who's in it with
Mm,
them. I think that's really important, especially in times of change.
right. And there's another comment. Sometimes leaders are communicative but have a negative mindset or a mistrusting mindset that creates an overall negative or trustless work environment. Yeah, it's true. Um, sometimes there are also such cases. We cannot choose or pick what's best or what's perfect. But it's what's important is that what we say should be also seen in what we do. So this, how should I say this saying, lead by example
Yeah, walk
or
the talk. Yep.
walk the talk. These are not just slogans,
Right.
yeah, if they are meant and if they are lived.
Absolutely.
Um, how can leaders create authentic connection in hybrid or high speed environments?
That's harder for sure.
Mm,
Especially in the hybrid environment, you've got some people in person, you've got some people who work remotely. It's really important not to forget the people who work remotely. And sometimes what I've talked with leaders, I've coached leaders. Sometimes what we'll do in a hybrid environment, um, when you can't bring everybody together physically, sometimes we'll actually just do a virtual instead of trying to do a hybrid because it evens the playing field. It makes the people who are virtual feel, they're at the same level as the people who are in person. So instead of saying, "Oh, I've got, 5 people here in the conference room with me and 2 people joining virtually," let's even the playing field and let's do it all virtually. And I think it's really important to spend some time in the beginning, whether it's an in-person meeting, a virtual meeting, a conversation, whatever it might be, spend some time getting to know the other person on a personal level or the other people. If it's your team, sure, you should know them, but how well do you really know them? There's lots of ways you can give an interesting prompt, when you join a meeting the first time and it's not just how's the weather, it's what's bringing you joy today, or it's, what's one thing that you've done this week that makes you proud, or, some other question like that to really start things off before you really get to brass tacks and you get into whatever the real meat, the substance of the meeting is about. It's really important to signal that you're open to connecting outside of meetings and that you're open to having conversations that aren't always just about work.
yeah. And what I've learned from one of my previous guests from Sunite, she's a master, an NLP master, and it's something related to also what you've mentioned. We cannot put ourselves in the shoes of the other person unless we are genuinely curious, and this is what Sunite mentioned.
Yep.
In Ideally, we should stay our entire life genuinely curious, because in such way we can create better connection, and there's excellence in every one of us. And maybe it's better to not ask in the elevator um, the famous question about, yeah, well, how's it going or how you doing, because you will not get an honest answer,
No,
or
no.
you will get a long answer that you don't want to hear.
That you don't want, right? Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, we should get we should try to build genuine connections by being genuinely curious. I know that there's not always the time for it,
Hmm.
yeah, because of the fast pace, because of the hybrid, because but this is something that makes us human and that makes
Yes.
us high performers.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Um what's what's the difference between genuine connection and performative niceness from your
Oh,
experience?
I'm laughing at that because I've done a workshop on lessons from our childhood teachers where I bring in some lessons from things that are more popular in American culture, like Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Yoda from Star Wars. And I talk about being kind to yourself, being kind to your team, and the word is kind, not nice. So genuine and kind, but we all know what it looks like to be nice, right? I mean,
Mm,
it's not genuine. It's it's actually somewhat avoidant sometimes, where someone's just sort of being nice to get rid of you. It's just not coming from within. And I think genuine connection, which is based on kindness, also is able to tolerate discomfort.
mm.
So if you're really connected with somebody, it's okay to feel discomfort with them because you have a foundation, you have a connection. Niceties don't do that. It's deeper.
Can you share a moment where connection tangibly shifted an outcome?
Oh, that's such a great question. Um, I think that happens in almost every workshop I facilitate, because no matter how connected or how well the team thinks they're connected, there's always room to deepen it. And I find that, sometimes I've just taken a pause. There was a team I was working with about a year ago, and, they were doing some planning and they needed to assess whether what they were doing currently were things they should still be doing or things they should jettison somehow. And they went into it feeling a little discomfort of, how do we have these conversations with each other? Because I might be recommending jettisoning somebody else's thing that they want to keep. So we did some activities beforehand. We did a little creative play. We did an activity that involved them pairing up and making new words and new phrases. It was in some ways kind of nonsensical, but it really had people making connections in many, many different ways, and laughing as well. And that
Mm,
really broke the barrier to being able to discuss these other things.
yeah, that's.
Comes
I
up
mean,
all the
such
time, though.
yeah, such experiences are they stay with the people in the room and they make a
They do.
difference.
They
Yeah,
absolutely do. Yep.
and the pause, those pauses may look small externally, but internally they can shift the entire trajectory of a person, of the career, the
Absolutely.
life of a person. So
Hmm.
yeah. Uh, Alison, the time flew.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize you've got like 2 minutes left. I didn't even realize
Yeah.
that. This has been
Um,
great.
yeah, I enjoyed it very much. And just one last question.
Sure.
What or how can leaders interrupt reactive patterns in the moment without withdrawing or escalating, in a meeting when things get heated in a meeting or
Well, first of all, you should hire a really good facilitator. I mean, I'm not entirely joking, although that is what I do for a living. But I really think it's important that leaders do have the self-awareness to take that pause. And I think it's perfectly okay in a meeting to say, I think we need to take a little break here. Actually physically take a break and then come back to it. If things are getting too overheated, I think it's okay to do that. That's not a cop-out. I think it gives everybody a chance to reset and reconnect again later. So, it's just, it's important for leaders to know that it's okay to also make mistakes, and that,
Yeah.
when we just learn from them. And so if things are getting heated and a leader feels like they said or did the wrong thing, again, that's a good time to express some vulnerability and to take a break and reset. I think it's just important that we keep coming back to this idea of emotional intelligence and self-awareness, and that's really the key.
Right. And to joy. That makes a
And
difference.
joy makes a huge difference. I am happy to talk another hour about that some other time.
Well, maybe, Alison, maybe you make a promise here live that you will join me for another session.
I would, if we talk about
Where we'll,
joy, I would like to,
yeah,
yes, I'd like to bring in a partner too, who is my partner in joy. So let's talk offline and see if we can set that up.
that's great. Thank you very much, Alison, for being here, for
My pleasure.
having this wonderful conversation with you, sharing experiences and knowledge. Thank you to our audience for their comments and questions. Um, for the audience, remember the next session, Visible Grace, the leadership of authentic presence, with Adina Cotiga, founder Cardinalia Models and CFO of Frigotechnica in Romania, takes place on the 19th of March from 5 to 6 p.m. Central European Time. I hope I will see you there. Until then, stay curious, stay connected, and lead with purpose. Thank you very much and have a nice evening. Bye, everybody.